Welcome back, Bears Nation podcast. It is Wednesday, April 6th. We are 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. So myself, Jake Hassan, as always, joined by Kevin Lapka. We're going to do some draft stuff. Bears, we've been a little slow. Hasn't been the most active free agency for the Bears. Haven't had any signings really in a couple of weeks. There was the initial wave after the fallout from the Larry Ogunjobi non-signing and failed physical. And now they've really haven't done too much. And it's been numbers assigned. And there's still a huge hole at right guard. So hopefully that gets addressed at some point. But that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to get into it right now. And we're going to talk about some draft stuff. Kevin Lapka, how you doing?
Doing well. Nice little new backdrop for you. A new apartment for Jake Hassan for those watching here on Twitch or YouTube or Twitter, wherever you may be watching.
Facts.
Welcome, Jake, to his new apartment and his new backdrop. I like it. It's refreshing.
Thank you. It's not even actually like this is like our extra room office. Like my roommate Seth, shout out Seth, works in here. So because my room's in the basement and that's not conducive to this show. So we moved into the office. It's fine. Everything's fine. First order of business, Kevin, I saw you this weekend.
Yeah, how about that, man? That was fun.
How about
good
it?
to see you down in Columbus. That was a good time, man. How about it?
It was tremendous. But that's not what you guys are here for. You saw the pictures if you follow either of us. But let's get into it. Bears stuff. Let's start right off the bat. We'll address the biggest needs, and that starts with wide receiver. Obviously, the biggest thing, Allen Robinson departs, Damiere Byrd departs, Marquise Goodwin departs. All that you're left with is Darnell Mooney, Daz Newsome, and the newly signed Byron Pringle and Equinomia St. Brown. It's not terrible. It's exceptionally average. With potential for upside if guys like Pringle and Mooney continue their ascent. They both just had their best years. Mooney, obviously, in Chicago with Justin Fields, and Pringle in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. So, Kevin, how do they address this? You have 2 second-round picks, potential for a trade-up. Obviously, last episode we talked about the let's call it an infatuation, but the or pipe dream even, because it seems unlikely. He seems to be solidly a top 20 pick right now in the first round, and the Bears don't select until the middle of the second round. So where are you at as far as wide receiver and as far as some of these prospects in the draft 3 weeks from now?
Look, this is what everybody's been waiting for. You know the Bears are going to target a receiver, and they'll likely do that with the first pick that they have in the second round. Let's go over their picks initially. They have the number 39 overall pick, and then they get number 48 overall still in the second round from the Chargers via the Khalil Mack trade. Then they have the third rounder, number 71, two fifth rounders at 147 and 149, and then a sixth rounder at number 184. I think they go wide receiver immediately at number 39. And we talked last episode, we did that whole spiel about Chris Olave because I talked to him and he's excited about playing with Justin Fields if that's a possibility. I would just about say at this point, April 6th, there is a 0% chance that they trade up for him. Given what Ryan Poles has said, the quote that he said, let me find it. He says, quote, "It's funny because there's a lot of panic like, you need receivers," Poles said. "I think Devonta Adams was taken in the second, right? So there's talent there. It's not always going to be like that. I get it, and we're going to be patient. If it's not there, we're not going to do it and force it either." So what he's saying is like, if a guy like Olave falls, obviously you're going to jump on that. But I don't think they're in a position. I don't think Ryan Poles is in a position to say, look, I am going to trade away future capital in this year's draft, especially when you need players. Like from a pure volume standpoint, you need players on the roster. He's not going to trade away a second round pick, a fifth round pick, and maybe a third round pick. You might have to package those 3 picks to move up to like 23 or 24 if Olave falls that far just to get him so he can pair him with Justin Fields. I thought that was a possibility weeks ago, but after doing more research and seeing the type of wide receiver talent that is available in round 2, I also don't think you need to do that without mortgaging other picks that you need to use on other positions of need like safety, like cornerback. So I think they take at least 2 wide receivers, but let's focus in right now initially on that second round pick, because a lot of times, and we said this on the show before, and it's true, you know, there's teams that reach for players. There's teams that reach for guys who are typically projected to be a second rounder who end up being in the, you know, the later end of the first round. You can find first round talent in the second round. I mean, the thing that I find interesting when you talk about wide receivers is I was doing the research of the top 20 receivers that led the league in yards last season. Only 6 were drafted in the first round. The other 14 are second, third, fifth, sixth, fourth, wherever you can find them. only 6 of those guys who led the league in receiving yards out of the top 20 were in the first round, which means you can find talent in these later rounds. And I think that the class is deep enough where you can find not just talent down the road 2-3 years from now, but talent day one, guy who you can pair with Justin Fields and provide the resources around him to make him the best quarterback possible. So I don't know where you're at. I am all in 100% that the Bears will take a wide receiver with that number 39 overall pick. And I would be absolutely shocked if they don't.
Yeah, it's just a matter of the thing about this is we don't know anything about Ryan Poles. Obviously, this is his first draft. We know he was in charge of not development, personnel in Kansas City. We know he had a hand in a lot of those drafts, but we know that we don't know what his style is, what he's looking for. Is he going to be aggressive? Well, if somebody falls to the end of the first round, is he going to package those 2 first-round picks, or not first round, second round picks, or will he package maybe a second and a fifth together and still hang on to the other 2 in each of those rounds respectively? We don't know. Or is he going to go for volume? This is a roster with a lot of holes. You have a lot of spots to fill, as we talked about on the last episode. So is it going to be more of, there's some like, this is just for example, we'll get into the specific names. But if George Pickens is falling into the 40s, you take 39 and say, okay, let's move back and take another 5th round pick or 6th round pick and then see what we can do from there. It's interesting at this juncture. I think we get the feeling that Poles is going to hold on to most of, if not all of these picks, unless it's in a position to trade back and get more. But yeah, I mean, receivers far and away what you have to attack first at 39. There are some guys that you can get there. And maybe, though, this is a deep class at a lot of positions. Who knows? If there's someone talented that falls, and honestly, fingers crossed, if someone's going to fall, it's at receiver or guard, offensive line, because those are your 2 biggest needs. But, I mean, let's start with Pickens because he seems to be entrenched as a second-round grade or pick, and that's the name that keeps cropping up when you look at Bears mock drafts.
Yeah, it's George Pickens. And so I did my research on him. We're going to go through a lot of guys, but let's start with George Pickens because that's the number 1 name. You're right. And it's almost to the point where I've seen it so many times, I don't think it's going to happen because you see it too much. It makes too much sense. And when you see it too many times, you're like, I don't know. I've seen it way too much. I don't think it's going to happen. The thing about George Pickens that I like is I see a lot of Justin Jefferson in him. He's an incredible athlete. And when you watch the highlight tape, he has some of the best acrobatic catches I've ever seen in college. I mean, I'm talking about extending. I'm talking about sideline catches. He's his range, his catch radius is really, really wide. He's a pure playmaker, but he's not the best route runner. And it's really evident in a lot of the tape that I watched of him. And he kind of gets caught at the line of scrimmage a lot. He's not very good at the line of scrimmage. So the pros are there, the fact that he's a really, really good athlete. But as far as creating space and being a really savvy route runner who's going to be able to put the moves on some of the best cornerbacks in the game, I would honestly put Darnell Mooney as, like, obviously Darnell Mooney is going to be, a veteran in the NFL now. But he is a far better route runner than what George Pickens is coming in. Darnell Mooney was a 6th round pick. Like, I do
5th round
pick. I get it mixed up, but I like George Pickens in a lot of ways. I am not elated to take him at number 39. That's my overall evaluation. There's other guys who I think are a better fit at that spot, but that athleticism and that pure playmaking ability is there. And that's really, really something that when people look at, they're really attracted to. They're really, really attracted to that. And I honestly could see a team, falling for that and jumping ahead of the Bears and taking him at like a 33 because they have an infatuation towards these acrobatic plays that he makes in big moments. He did it in, the college football playoff. He did it against the better teams. Again, he played at Georgia. He's playing against some of the best defenses in the league, in the SEC. He's doing it against good teams. I could see a team jumping ahead of them. And if they do, I'm totally fine. I don't think it's, oh shit, if we don't get George Pickens at 39, nobody, like, our wide receiver options are off the board. I see a lot of Bears fans who are like, hey, it's George Pickens or bust at 39. If you don't get George Pickens, hold on. Let's wait a little bit deeper. Maybe we can get a better value in the 3rd round or the 5th round, or maybe even at 49. That's where I stand with Pickens. I think he's a playmaker. I think he's athletic. I don't think he's someone where, you even need to trade up a few picks to get him. If he falls to you, okay, I'm not going to be upset if someone takes him ahead of 39.
I think the infatuation, and I think why a lot of people are kind of dreaming of this George Pickens and Justin Fields pairing is because we really don't really know the full extent of what Pickens can do even. He tore his ACL in the spring of 2021. We saw him for the last 4 games of this past Georgia national championship run. But that being said,
number
he
one,
had,
bottom of your screen.
like,
here's Fromm to throw. Coming across the middle, it is Pickens. He flashes some of that stuff.
Is that audio playing?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
For me,
is it stopped now?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
But anyway.
But yeah, go on about Pickens.
Also with Pickens, and I think, he made one play in the national championship game, and that was the 52-yard layout catch. It was really the big moment for him coming off this ACL. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? How involved is he going to be? And I think that's what a lot of Bears fans lock onto, that 150-yard catch, because Justin Fields, obviously, we know what he can do with the deep ball. We know what he can do with athletic receivers, the connection he made with Darnell Mooney. You give him a guy like Pickens who can do that, and Bears fans start salivating. And I get it. Makes sense. So I think that you could see that potential for teams to want to jump up for him, because that potential still seems untapped. It feels like we have Jordan.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really fair evaluation. I mean, I think you could be right. And honestly, that's like a fair argument with a lot of these players, especially like when you go down the list and you start to look at players from schools that aren't Georgia, or schools that aren't even, the major Big Ten schools, the major SEC schools, or teams that don't really have a good quarterback or a good offense in general, you can make that case. I mean, you can look at a lot of these guys and say, dude, this guy was playing quarterback for them. Of course, he's not going to put up the same numbers from a pure numerical standpoint as some of these guys.
Sure.
You look at Pickens, pure combine numbers, 4.47 40-yard dash. He's in the 4.4 range. That's good. Vertical jump at 33, broad jump 125. So he's athletic. He's 6'3", only 195. He's pretty small for his height, but he's got a pretty big arm span at 32 inches and 3/8. So like it's there. The raw ability is there. When he gets to the NFL level, he's going to need to polish some of that route running and polish some of that aggressiveness at the line of scrimmage. I can see him going up against Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey just sticking a hand in his face and locking him up at the line. So it's there, though. I really like your point about the untapped potential. That's 100% true. And the way I evaluate receivers in a lot of ways, and the way I evaluate players is like I have an upside perspective on it. Like, I like to look for players who, maybe they don't have it right now. Maybe they came from a smaller school. Maybe they have some things to work on, but the upside is there. The ceiling is higher than the ceiling of other players, although the floor of the other player is higher. Those are things I'm totally okay on. I'm totally fine with taking a flyer on a player with more upside. I am Skox in the chat says, only red flag is his character in previous suspensions. And this is a really, really important detail. I mean, Ryan Poles is very keen on, hey, we need to get the right people in the building. We need to get the people of character. And, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are the same way. I mean, they're bringing in well-respected people, good character guys. But I think it is important that, in the opening press conference and in the things that we've heard from Ryan Poles, he spoke a lot about the character, and Matt Eberflus is obviously a guy of high character. That is something to just consider. It's not going to totally deter them from drafting him, but it's something to consider, I would say.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot of consideration there. But like you said, if somebody takes him ahead of time, which is very, very possible, especially if there's a run on wide receivers like we might see in this draft, especially once those guys like Olave start going and people start to panic, it might be something like that where other teams are saying, okay, we got to get someone like Pickens before he comes off the board. And then you're left with some of these middle tier guys, which, Kevin, I know you have a full list of them, so I'll let you take the lead on those guys.
Well, let's go back. Well, let's first go back to like second round. I have more guys who I think they can take at 39, who I think are a better option than George Pickens. And this is something that when I looked this up, it totally blew my mind. In the past 5 years, the average number of receivers taken in the first round has been 3.6. And for some reason, that blows my mind because the past 2 drafts have been really, really deep with receivers. It feels like there's been 6 taken, 7 almost in the first round, and you're struggling to get a receiver who's of high quality in the second round, and it's just really hard to do. The 5-year average is 3.6. And I think we kind of have sort of a recency bias of these past 2 years of, look, the classes are so strong. We're looking at, 3 wide receivers taken in the top 15, maybe even 4. The same can't be said about this draft class, in my opinion. So I do think there is a very strong scenario that run for receivers happens later rather than earlier. And I think it is certainly possible. But to these names that I like at 39 who aren't George Pickens, let's start with, Jahan Dotson from Penn State. This is a player with
Mhm.
very, very good hands, very, very good body control. I watched him play live at Ohio State this year. When they played at Penn State, Ohio State played at Penn State. I wasn't there, but I watched it on TV. He made one of the craziest catches I've ever seen against Sean Wade. He had 3 touchdowns. He runs a 4.43 40. He is 5'11", only 178, so he's a smaller guy, but you can really line him up anywhere, and he has the speed to break away from the defense, really go around for the catch. Jahan Dotson, to me, is a better option than George Pickens. I like him at 39. He's got the speed to do it. You can literally line him up anywhere slot outside, and he has the hands and he has the ability to do whatever you need him to do at each of those positions wherever you line him up. It's not just, he has the versatility to do it. He has the ability to excel at each of those areas. I think Jahan Dotson is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the draft. I think he could be a later and first round pick, in my opinion. The things that he showed me at Penn State with his hands, with his athleticism, body control, ability to track the football, to me, puts him right there prime for 39. Now, you're right. For some reason, the whole world is sleeping on him. I don't know why. The whole world has Pickens above him. I really, really like Jahan Dotson from Penn State. Everyone's going to think about Allen Robinson from Penn State. I could see a little bit of that in him, but I think he's a far more athletic, far more faster receiver than Allen Robinson. So I really like Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, I knew you'd bring him up, and I was waiting for Johan Dotson. Obviously, both went to Big Ten schools, so we're familiar with his work. He was second team All Big Ten in this past season. He was third team All American. He was third team All Big Ten in the season prior to that. And that's with working with the types of quarterbacks that Penn State rolls out there on every yearly basis. They're not special. They're not Justin Fields. They're not these guys at the top of the Big Ten. They're guys. They're not NFL starters. And Jahan Dotson made these guys at Penn State look like NFL caliber quarterbacks. I mean, the type of athleticism that he possesses is unbelievable. It's insane. And the thing that I really like about Dotson is that he can play anywhere. You put him anywhere. You put him on the outside, on the inside, in the slot. He's going to be able to do any of those things for you. That versatility, I think, is very, very important, especially for the type of Green Bay type offense you think we might see this coming season. I think that's huge. I think I would put Pickens ahead of Dotson by a hair for me, for like if I was doing like a personal rankings, but it's close. And maybe that's because I'm putting more value into what Pickens could maybe be. Right. Dotson's probably more refined. I think Dotson, if you can get him at 39 or hell, even at 48 or 49, whatever it is, that's great. And I think that'll end up being a steal. And I think that is some guy that you should target, especially with Justin Fields. And you need Justin Fields to refine what he can do in all facets of his game. Not refine, but work on all facets of passing game. The only knock on him, I think, is that he's a little bit shorter, a little bit thinner, and you kind of already have that with Darnell Mooney.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with having two similar type receivers. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs; they're all the same. I mean, they're all literally the same exact receiver. It seems like, aside from Josh Gordon, who doesn't even play a snap over there. But so I'm fine with that. But let's go now. So here's what I think the Bears are going to do as far as receiver and what happens throughout the draft. I think they go 39 at receiver, and then I think they take cornerback at second round, number 48 overall, and then I think they go back to wide receiver in the third round.
So you think they go? You think they go corner and then receiver again before they attack offensive line?
I do. To me,
you think they're going to go with Dozier at right guard?
I don't think they need to go with Dozier. I mean, if you look at the line right now, they have.
It's either him or Simmons.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Because they have.
I mean, you need to at least get a body there.
They got Jenkins, Borum, Lucas Patrick, Cody Whitehair, and you're right. I guess that
because James Daniels left.
James Daniels is gone, and if Eddie is now part of the Atlanta Falcons, because Ryan Pace has just simply brought every single Bear over there. You're right. I still think that I would rather, to be honest, I'd rather go after I'd rather go after a wide receiver earlier and then a cornerback and then another wide receiver before I'd go after guard or before I go after, any other offensive line position. That is where I stand, if I'm being entirely honest. I mean, I think you can potentially find an lineman with value in the 5th round. You did it with Larry Borom, essentially. I think there's free agents out there you can still acquire if need be. And here's the thing that I look at when I look at, what will they do with the rest of the roster after the draft? It seems like you're at that point now where you are going to see how the draft plays out for you. Maybe it plays out not the way you want it, or you just go a different route than what you expected. It happens, those 3 days are weird. Anything can happen. And then you fill out the roster with these auxiliary veteran pieces after the draft. I think that could be what the Bears do. So it's like, hey, we got really good value. A wide receiver fell to us here in the 3rd round. Shit, we wanted to take the guard. We didn't. We took the wide receiver. Let's go after one of the free agent guards who's 36 years old or whatever, who's still available, and just work with that, right? Like a Jason Peters type deal, something like that. And I do think the trade back is possible, but my idea is that you take wide receiver at 39, then you opt out, you take CB. Maybe you take CB or guard at 48, and then you go back to wide receiver at 71. You got to load up with as many players as you can to surround Justin Fields with. And at 71 overall, the name I really like, I don't know if he'll fall this far, I think he might, is Calvin Austin III from Memphis. He is exactly what Ryan Poles is looking for out of receiver. A very Chiefs type receiver that, of course, Ryan Poles' background coming from Kansas City, that he would like. He's similar to Tyreek Hill. He's got extremely good punt return ability. There's a play where if you watch his tape of last year, I forget who they're playing, he was returning a punt. The ball was downed essentially, and the defense or the punt, the special teams of the other team was going to, touch the ball down, and he swooped right through a group of 4 guys, grabbed the ball, took it to the house, like 80-yard touchdown. He is arguably the fastest player in this draft. We're in a 4-3-2. You can line him up in the slot. He can do a lie after the catch. You can throw wide receiver screens to him. You can throw a slant, and he'll make a lot of moves for you. He reminds me a lot of Tyreek Hill. Again, when I make these player comps, I'm not saying that Calvin Austin is going to be one of the best receivers in the league in 3 years. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the way he plays is similar to Tyreek Hill. That is a guy to keep your eye on in the 3rd round. I don't know if he'll fall any further than that. Went to Memphis, shorter guy, very small guy, but, similar to a Byron Pringle, like similar to the guys that Ryan Poles wants to bring in. So I could see them doing that in the 3rd round if they want. I mean, again, the question becomes to you, right? The Bengals had to answer this question every single day last year in the draft process. What matters more to your second-year quarterback, a wide receiver or an offensive line to protect him? And that question was, I think, left unanswered because Jamar Chase was the rookie of the year, but the offensive line was still one of the worst units in the league at the time. Where do you stand, given what the Bears have done in free agency or what they could do after the draft? When it comes to 3rd round, obviously, when you're evaluating this question, it's different when you have a number 7 overall pick versus number 3rd overall pick or 3rd round pick. In that position, what is more valuable to you?
I mean, I'm always going to say that it's more valuable to keep your quarterback upright. I mean, that's 10 times out of 10. That's what I'm going to say. Yes, there are still some guys out there in the offensive line market that you can get. I mean, there's still J.C. Treader out there. I've heard his name a lot when you talk about the Bears, which, I mean, he's a good center, a veteran center, and then you can move Patrick to guard possibly. That's something you think about. There's a lot of guys out there, but this is also a deep offensive line class as well with a lot of freak athletes too. So you could look at something there. Let me ask you this. Because he's still out there, if Ryan Poles decides to take the swing and bring in Tyrann Mathieu, and that kind of shores up your secondary a little bit, and maybe that makes you feel more comfortable about rolling out Thomas Graham as your other outside corner, do you then think, like, let's say tomorrow, Tyrann Mathieu is announced to signing with the Chicago Bears? Like a 2-year deal or whatever, 1-year deal. Does that make you feel more inclined to go offensive line with that 2nd pick in the 2nd round?
Yeah, it does. It does make me feel more inclined to do that. I mean, I still think cornerback is arguably a bigger position of need than is wide receiver. I think you can honestly make that argument. But you're right. The help that you would get from a back a safety group of Eddie Jackson and Tyrann Mathieu is special. So yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in Thomas Graham regardless. It's just when you go down the list and you're like, shit, Kendall Vildor again. No, like I'm not doing that anymore. You know what I mean? Right. And that's where you start to get concerned. But I think to answer your question, And to answer your question, like, this is reality. I think he visited with the Saints 2 days ago. The Bears are a legitimate landing spot from the reports that we've heard to land Tyrann Mathieu. And quite frankly, it makes too much sense, right? Because he was in Kansas City, Ryan Poles was. He's got a strong relationship with him. But also, the Bears haven't done anything. You're waiting for that. Like, because of the Ogunjobi signing that collapsed, you're still waiting for, like, a lower, mid-tier splash, right? Like, I don't even know if Byron Pringle is like a mid-tier splash. Like,
oh, no.
I
would say not. He's a name that people recognize, but I wouldn't say he's like a
anything. Like there's tier 1, tier 2, let's go tier 1 through 5. I think Byron Pringle's like tier 4, and I think Ogunjobi was like a tier 2, signing. But Tyrann Mathieu's a tier 1 signing, and I think the Bears are due for at least one of those. I think it has to happen at some point. Like even a Julio Jones at some point, right? Like something like that. Like that to me is still a tier 2 signing.
You got to get off the Julio Jones.
I'm throwing names out, Jake. I'm throwing names. I'm not saying they're going to sign Julio Jones. I'm just telling you, like, I don't think I for some reason I have this hunch that they're still waiting on that big, splash move that says, okay, Ryan Poles has arrived. I could be wrong, but yeah, that would be.
No, I agree with that.
More inclined to go CB if they do that. So that's why it's hard to predict right now. I mean, They're not going to go after 3 different safeties in the next 3 weeks free agency, but they could go after a guy, and they got Dane Cruikshank, who I like. So
yeah. It's very weird how much the process has slowed down for the Bears, considering all the holes they have to fill. I mean, look at all the guys that you've watched depart this team so far. You mentioned the Cheyenne Falcons, like a lot of guys going there that were on the team last year. Alex, the Raiders, among other guys. Allen Robinson obviously went to the Rams. It's very weird, and it seems like and maybe it's because signings have slowed down to such an extent that it seems like there isn't such a sense of urgency, but it feels like you got to do something. And granted, you have 3 weeks. You got 3 weeks from, assuming that you guys are listening to this on Thursday, and obviously the people here right now in the live chat, pretend it's tomorrow. You got 3 weeks, so there's still plenty of time for you to sign a Tyrann Mathieu, a J.C. Treader, a Sammy Watkins, who we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So there's still enough to do, and that could change things. That could change the outlook a lot. Again, we don't know anything about Ryan Poles or how he's going to attack this draft.
Right. I think you're right. And I know you got to head out of here, so I'll give you one more wide receiver name to just keep an eye on since we're doing this deep dive. Justin Ross from Clemson. This was a name everybody recognized his freshman year. In the national championship, he had 6 receptions, 153 yards, and 1 touchdown against one of the best defenses in Alabama history with Xavier McKinney and Pat Surtain and the guys that they had up front. He torched them. His freshman year, he had 1,000 yards, 46 receptions, had averaged 20.7 yards per reception and 9 touchdowns. He was, as a freshman, he was doing this. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence was his QB, but again, ACC, you're playing relatively good competition, but he was a beast. Then the next year he went down with like a knee injury. He missed all of 2020 and then came back 2021. Sort of didn't really play well because the offense was different. The quarterback was different. And a lot of scouts that I've seen from the AFC who I'm reading on these websites say only evaluate him based off his 2019 tape, given the situation that he was in after 2020. He's 6'4", 205, huge body. He wins at the line extremely well. You could be right up on him, pressing him straight up. He'll find a way to win around you. There's this extremely good play from the national championship where he broke a guy's ankles on that. He's a really good route runner. He has unbelievable hands. If you watch the tape solely from the national championship game in 2019, that will sell you on him. But because of the injury, because of his lack of production in 2021, he is falling. He's falling so far, it's unbelievable. And the Bears could truly get an unbelievable steal out of Justin Ross in the 3rd, maybe even the 5th, if people freak out about it. It's like an Eddie Jackson type scenario. Although he didn't break his leg last year, like people are worried about that. What's John Mechie, from Alabama? Yeah. Tore his ACL in December. One of the most talented wide receivers in the draft, going to fall because people don't know if he's going to be ready. He's going to be the same player. Those questions are there. I think Justin Ross was thrust into a tough situation in 2021. I know he didn't play of 2020. I think he is one of the most rawly talented. Is that even a word? Rawly? He's one of the most raw players in the draft. You want to talk about upside. You want to talk about, the George Pickens argument that you made about, I don't know if we've seen the best from him. We have not seen the best from Justin Ross. I think the Bears could be in a legitimate spot to take him, but except I would caution to reach for him at 39. I think if he were to be taken by the Bears, it would be second round at 48. just given where I've seen with his ADP and his mock drafts and stuff. So that's just a name to keep your eye on. Everyone's going to know it, but everyone's kind of wondering, well, why, what happened to him? So
I like Ross a lot. He's clearly a playmaker, clearly has the traits you look for. And I mean, the physical traits, like you mentioned, he also has like pretty big hands, almost 10-inch hands, which is big, obviously. So, I mean, if you could get Justin Fields a big target like that, that's huge. And I think that would pair well with a Darnell Mooney, because then, Ross has that potential possibly to be that number one. It's, who knows? It's obviously up in the air, and then how they develop any of these guys, they could turn into anything. So I like Ross a lot. Real quick, someone else I want to hit on real quick is Kevin Austin out of Notre Dame.
Okay.
He broke out in 2021. He was really good. And this was after not playing, really. He suspended for all of 2019, and then in 2020 he had a broken foot. Then in 2021, led the Irish in receiving yards and was tied for the team lead with touchdowns. Like, that's someone who was, and the Notre Dame was in the playoff contention for most of the year. So big time program still with that big time experience. Notre Dame quarterbacks, say what you want about them, but at least in college, they're halfway decent in the last couple of years. So I like him as a potential target as well. I like Ross better. I like Pickens better. But if you don't get one of those guys that you're really looking for, I think Austin could be a target based on his production and his first year playing, really, and the program that he comes from.
I agree. I mean, it may not shake out for you. You might have to go 5th round wide receiver. And if you have to do, that's fine. And Kevin Austin is probably more of like a 5th round type player, right? Based off his ADP. You think about a guy like Tyquan Thornton as well out of Baylor. He's more in that 5th round range. Fastest player in the draft, by the way, Tyquan Thornton ran a 4.28 40 at the combine. He's 6'2", 181. He is a guy to keep your eye on as well. And the Bears, I think regardless, Jake, as we wrap up, that the way the Bears approach this is regardless of how it happens, you take at least 2 wide receivers, not at least, but I think set on 2 wide receivers in the draft. You have to take 2.
I think so.
And, and the interesting thing is, like, you have untapped potential in Daz Newsome as well. Like, we don't know what he could be. I don't know. I can't say. I can't evaluate it right now. We just don't know what he's going to be. You're going to have a lot of young guys. And the crazy thing is, as these roster, these extensions are coming in, and Stephon Diggs is getting paid $26 million a year. Devontae Adams is getting 30, 40, whatever, however much he's getting. And the numbers are just ridiculous for these guys. If you take 2 wide receivers, you have 6 wide receivers, 4 of them on rookie contract. Like, that's exactly what you like. That is exactly what you want as far as value. And then the ability to, structure a roster while you're still under the cap. Like, those are things that are great when you think about long-term, how are we going to set this team up for success instead of, hey, let's just go this year in March, pay Devontae Adams $50 million, and then, oh shit, he's here for a few years and we're screwed for the next 5 years. If you get 2 guys and you have 4 guys under a rookie contract, you're paying them, especially if they're 5th round guys, $2 million, $3 million per year. Holy shit, you're winning. Darnell Mooney had the 21st or something most receiving yards last year. You're paying him. What are you paying him? I don't even know how much you're paying him. $2 million? I don't know, but like, these are things that are really important when you think about the things that Ryan Poles cares about in the valuation of these contracts and just the cap management, which is obviously important. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah.
I'm excited, man. I think these wide receivers are going to be good fits, whoever they are.
Yeah, and the picture will become clear over the next 3 weeks too. We'll learn more about what happens with these guys. So it'll be interesting to follow. It'll be interesting to see what Ryan Poles says in the upcoming weeks. And as things become clearer and as more signings happen, because they will happen, more so not out of optimism, but because they have to happen based on the Bears roster and lack of warm bodies there. But hey, they had their camp. Guys are showing up to Ellis Hall, and they look happy. Saw a picture of Roquan Smith smiling and laughing there. So we'll like it. We'll take it. So we love that. But we'll be back in the future to break down more draft stuff as it gets closer and bring you more evaluations of some of the guys we like, and when these signings happen, of course, of breakdowns of those free agents as well. So shorter episode today, little mini episode, quick, bang, bang, bang of some receivers, but we'll keep doing stuff like this, obviously, and bringing you the content that you so crave. So until then, for myself, Jake Hassan, as always, Kevin Lapka, this has been Bears Nation Podcast. Bear down.